All right, our 3 theories on dividends, and then what does the evidence actually say? Should be able to get these all done in one video. Maybe a little long, but they all kind of flow together, so we'll try to knock them out all at once. Theory 1 is a dividend irrelevance theory. Just like capital structure irrelevance, guess who came up with this one? Our good old friends Modigliani and Miller. So not only did they look at capital structure, they also looked at dividend policy. And the two are kind of interrelated, right? Like our capital structure will affect our dividend policy will impact our capital structure policy. So both have to kind of be considered at the same time. Well, they went into fake world again. Okay, so we're back in fake econ world, as I like to call it. And they said that, look, the cash flows of this firm are the same. Right? Like, who cares if I pay it as dividends and you get a dividend yield, or I keep your money as retained earnings and I grow and you get a capital gain yield? Like, why should you care as an investor? Right? It goes back to that concept that if two assets produce the same cash flow, shouldn't they have the same values? Well, if the firm produces the same cash flow either way, and that cash flow belongs to shareholders, then does it really matter if I give it to you as a dividend or a capital gain? And they said, no, it does not. They even said, look, if a firm pays you a dividend, and let's say you don't want it, you're like, no, I don't want your dividend. You have to take it, right? But let's say like you don't need the cash. Well, Modigliani and Miller were like, hey, just go buy some more stock of the firm. Simple enough, right? You got rid of the cash. You got to grow your wealth. Problem solved. If you don't want the dividend, just get rid of it and buy more stock of the firm. And they said, if you do want a dividend and the firm's not paying it, so like, hey, guys, I want a dividend. And the firm's like, no dividend for you. What do? You sell some of the stock. And you basically make your own dividend, right? You make your own cash distribution from your holdings of the firm's stock. So Modigliani and Miller were like, you shouldn't really care if the firm pays a dividend or not, because you can basically like make your own burrito or make your own pizza. You can make your own distribution policy as the investor, that if they give you a dividend, if you don't want it, just go buy more of the stock. And if they don't give you a dividend and you do want it, just reinvest the dividend. Or wait, no, I just said the same thing twice. If they do give you the dividend and you don't want it, go reinvest it and buy more stock. If they don't give a dividend and you did want one, just go sell some of the stock to give yourself a cash flow. Now, they were living in fake world. What does all of this ignore? This whole, just go buy more stock or sell more stock kind of thing? Yeah, how about brokerage costs? Right? So they were ignoring two primary things here. The brokerage cost that's associated with going buy and sell more stock, of course, right? It's not free to buy and sell the stock and go create or get rid of the dividend. They're also ignoring the fact that if they do pay dividends, you do have to take it. And you can't just go simply reinvest it because you have to pay taxes on it. Bummer. But if we had no brokerage costs, and if we had no taxes, and if we had no information asymmetry, and all those other crazy rules and assumptions they kind of came up with in their models, then it really wouldn't matter because the cash flows are the cash flows. Who cares how you get it? Okay. So that theory says dividends don't matter, but again, fake econ world, so we don't really believe that's true. So what's some other things we can say? Well, we can go with what's called the preference theory. Preference theory says that there's a dividend preference for this one. The next one's going to be a capital gain preference, so I should distinguish these. This is also called a bird in the hand theory. And it leads to a preference for dividends. Now, if we were in the classroom together, I would play the video for you. If I was smart enough to know how to get the audio that I hear in my headset right now, to be recorded by my iPad, like on this, like when I go to the video, then I would do that. I still have not figured that out. It's been over a year with this now, right? We're in our third full semester with this technology, and I'm still not smart enough. But I would recommend, if you want to know where this theory gets the name from. Oh, that's not what I wanted. Oh, yeah, look, I was trying to look up again how to do this. But go look up. You can see what I search for way too much. Go look up the Geico commercial. Search for Bird in the Hand and Geico. There's a commercial with a woman saying, oh, a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. That's the saying. I used to assume that students knew what that meant. Of course, I should really stop assuming anything about students. Bird in the hand versus two in the bush gets its saying from the fact that it's hard to catch a bird, right? So if I have one bird in my hand, I've caught it. That one bird in my hand is worth more to me than two birds sitting in a bush, a shrub. I actually had two doves sitting in my husband's outside grow tent this morning that I had to get out. Birds are hard to catch. Birds are hard to get out of grow tents. The doves ran into our sliding glass doors like 3 or 4 times before they managed to find their way out of the grow tent and not run into the door and not fly back into the grow tent on our deck. Anyways, it means certainty is better than uncertainty, right? That I rather take something of lesser value that has certainty than take something of higher value but with uncertainty. Now, how does this theory apply to dividend policy? Dividends are certain. What we're going to see is that dividends are pretty reliable. They have to be, because if not, they're going to send some really bad signals. Whereas repurchases are going to be uncertain, right? Like, I don't know when a firm's going to do a repurchase, but I know that typically once a firm starts a dividend policy, then every year I can expect them to pay a dividend. They're going to declare a dividend, they're going to pay the dividend in 4 quarterly payments throughout the year, and they're going to do the same thing the next year and the next year and the next year. And typically the dividend either is going to remain the same or increase, rarely decrease, because it's going to send a super bad signal, which we'll talk about. And so we know investors like certainty, right? We know we do not like risk. We are risk-averse people. And so this theory says that investors, it says, value $1 of dividends more highly than $1 of expected capital gains, because a certain dividend is less risky than a possible capital gain, which would come from a repurchase. Right? They want just that certainty, like just set it and forget it. Give me my quarterly dividend. Give me my annual dividend announcement. Maybe it's less than a capital gain. I don't care. At least I can rely on it. And so what that implies is that a high dividend stock should be worth more. So therefore it should have a higher price and a lower required return than a low dividend stock. So if I had 2 stocks and the companies like performed exactly the same, but one paid a dividend and one relied on repurchases, hence capital gains, then I'm willing to pay more for the high dividend stock than the low dividend stock. That's what this theory says. Bird in the hand theory, dividend preference. Now, theory 3 says the exact opposite, because of course. Theory 3 says, well, let's consider taxes, guys. And tax laws change. You'll learn that if you haven't already, especially when you start doing your taxes. Tax laws change a lot of times when political parties change. Tax laws changed last year with COVID, right? They gave special exemption to withdraw from your 401k without penalty, which I did. Help pay off some credit card debt early, kind of thing. And you still had to pay taxes on it, but you didn't have to pay the 10% early withdrawal fee, because I'm obviously younger than whatever it is, 59 and a half or whatever. tax laws change all the time, but it used to be to where ordinary income tax was paid on dividends, but the capital gain tax, the long-term capital gain tax, was lower than most people's dividend tax rates. That was changed in 2003 to where now they're the same. And so there used to be an actual straight out tax benefit to capital gains over dividends. They were just straight out taxed at a lower rate. And that could go back to that eventually, right? Like I said, tax laws change all the time. But even if that's not true, even if they're taxed at the same rate, you should prefer capital gains over dividends. Dividends, you have to take them. And when do you pay the tax? When you receive it. Which is going to be, like this year, let's say, kind of thing. Right? You're going to receive this year's dividend, and at the end of the year, you're going to owe taxes on it. Capital gains, you do not pay until you realize them. That could be 20, 30, 40 years from now. Even if it's just 5 years from now. When do we always prefer to pay in finance? Later. So if I have a choice between paying taxes on something now versus paying taxes on something later, later wins, always. And so capital gains have a preferential tax treatment over dividends. And I know I've told you guys this before, and I actually appreciate this textbook because they explicitly spell it out that, if you die and you leave that stock to someone else, capital gain gets erased. No one ever pays taxes on that capital gain that you experienced over your lifetime. Morbid? Yes. Way to take advantage of the tax system? Yep. Legal way to take advantage of the tax system. Avoid paying taxes by dying. Even if you don't want to die, though. Like I said, you'd rather pay taxes later versus now, so capital gains are preferred. So tax effect theory says that investors prefer capital gains over dividends because capital gain taxes can be deferred into the future, but taxes on dividends must be paid as the dividends are received. This implies that a high capital gain stock, so again, I'm just comparing two exactly the same stocks in terms of like the performance of the company, but the high capital gain stock should have a higher price and lower required return than a low capital gain stock, all else held equal. So this one says you should prefer capital gains, whereas theory 2 said no, prefer dividends. So what do we actually see happen? We definitely know that companies do realize that there's tax implications of their distribution policies. So taxes, it says, certainly affect the dividend policies chosen by companies. We know that investors love to avoid taxation. And we'll kind of make this a little bit more sophisticated in our next theory, the clientele theory. Not all investors care so much about taxes, but certain groups of investors definitely do. And so they may heavily favor theory 3. Other investors may favor theory 2, and we'll talk about the difference. And there is some evidence that says that investors do require a higher return on stocks with big dividend payouts. Why? Because they know they're going to get higher taxes on it, right? And so to compensate for the fact that they're going to end up paying eventually a higher tax effectively on their distribution, they're going to be like, I want a little bit more of a return to offset that higher tax I'm going to incur. So taxes are definitely a factor, more so than we find with the whole certainty argument sort of thing. So that's our 3 basic theories about what's going on and how companies set their policies and how it can relate to firm value. We can refine those a little bit more by looking at something called the clientele effect, signaling theory, see what that means for stability in dividends, and then look at an actual model called the residual distribution model.